Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to learn the chapter, the last lesson. Remember, this is a prose section of your syllabus, and before I give you the explanation of each and every paragraph of this story, I would like to say something about the author first. As you can see in your textbook, the author of this story is Mr. Alphonse Daudet. Okay, and he was born in 1840 and he died in 1897. Students, he was a French novelist and short story writer. The last lesson means the story that we are going to read is set in the days of the Franco-Prussian War. Okay, Franco-Prussian War, and this war was held between 1870 to 1871. Alright, and in which France was defeated by Prussia, and this Prussia was being led by Bismarck that time. Okay, Bismarck, he was a dictator, you know. Prussia then consisted of what now are the nations of Germany, Poland, and some parts of Austria. Student, keep in mind this is Austria, a European country, not Australia. In this story, the French districts of Alsace and Lorraine, means the two districts, Alsace and Lorraine, have passed into Prussian hands. Students, let's read the story to find out what effect this had on life at school. Alright, student. Now we'll have the explanation of this story. And get ready. Keep the book in front of you. Paragraph wise, okay, I will tell you that what is happening. Alright. I will give you the explanation of each and every paragraph. So keep your ears on and let's start. The narrator of the story is a young school-going boy named Franz. That morning he was scared as he was late for school. Also, as their teacher Mr. Hamel had announced the previous day that he would question or he would test them on the topic of participles. And Franz, the boy, did not know anything at all. He was more scared of being scolded. Franz had another option in his mind: to miss school and enjoy the day out in the warm and bright weather. He describes the scene. There were birds chirping on the trees, and the noise of the Prussian soldiers doing the drilling, doing the exercise, okay, behind the sawmill could also be heard. The scene outside was more attractive than the school, but Franz controlled the temptation and chose to attend school. As Franz walked past the town hall, he noticed a huge crowd of people at the notice board. The war with Prussia had begun 2.5 years ago, and since then all the bad news like losing the war, occupation of Alsace and Lorraine by the enemy, that is Prussia, etc., had been communicated to the people through this bulletin board. That means through the notice board. Franz kept on walking towards the school and thought in his mind that what news could have been put up at the board now. As he walked hurriedly towards the school, the blacksmith, who was also reading the news and had come along with his trainee, called out to Franz from behind and said that he needn't go in such a hurry as there was plenty of time for him to reach school. Franz thought that the blacksmith was making fun of him, as he was already late for school. When Franz reached the garden outside the school, he was out of breath, as he had walked very fast. Franz describes the usual scene at school in the mornings. A lot of noise created by the moving of desks, children repeating their lessons, and teachers striking the tables with the rulers could be heard. That day was unusual, as there was no such sound coming out of the school, and it seemed that the school was closed, as it used to be on a Sunday morning. Franz had planned that he would take cover under the commotion, under the noise, and reach the class without being noticed, but that did not appear or seem possible for him. Franz peeped inside. He looked inside through the, window that his class, was on. And he saw his classmates seated and Mr. M. Hamel, means their teacher, walking in the class with a ruler made of iron placed under his arm. Franz feared a beating. He was afraid of being scolded. Franz was ashamed of being late and feared a scolding, as he had to enter the classroom in front of everyone. Franz found it strange, as Mr. Hamel did not say anything, and on the contrary, on his opposite, politely asked him to get to his seat as the class was about to begin without him. Franz hurried to his seat. After some time, when he overcame the scare and became comfortable, he noticed that their teacher had worn his best embroidered that day. Okay, that means he was wearing a very special suit that time. The teacher normally wore it on occasions like inspection and prize distribution days. Franz was surprised. He wondered if that day was a normal day. Then what could be the reason for Mr. M. Hamel to wear his special dress? They all looked sad. Hauser, the old person from the village, had brought his reader book, which was old and torn. He had opened it, kept it on his knees, and had placed his spectacles, his glasses, on that book. Franz was confused and could not figure out what was happening that day. Just then, Mr. M. Hamel told them that it was their last lesson in their language, that is French, because the Prussians in Berlin had ordered that French language would no longer be taught in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, and that German language be taught instead. The German teacher would come the next day, and as this was the last lesson in French, he wanted them to pay attention. Franz was shocked to know that he could not learn French any longer, and now he knew the latest news that had been put up at the bulletin board, at the notice board of the town hall. Now what happens further, we shall come to know in the next class. Franz regretted for not being serious towards his studies, and for wasting his time in hunting birds' eggs and playing in the Saar River. Till now, Franz considered his books to be an unwanted burden, but suddenly he starts considering them to be his best friends whom he could never leave. The writer wants to show the change in Franz's attitude towards study after hearing the news that he could not learn French any longer. The news that their teacher, Mr. M. Hamel, was leaving also had a similar impact on him. Franz did not want him to go away. He no longer thought the teacher to be short-tempered and strict. Now Franz knew that Mr. M. Hamel was wearing his best dress in honor of this last lesson. He also realized that the village men had come to pay respect and that Hamel for his service of 40 years in that school. The village men had come to the class as they were also repenting, feeling sorry for not having studied properly well in their childhood. They had come to thank their teacher for his 40 years of service as a teacher of French. Also, they wanted to show respect to their country and were sad as their mother tongue, French, would no longer be taught to them. The teacher calls out to Franz as his turn to recite the topic of participles had come. As the news had impacted Franz, he was eager to study and so he was desperate. He was upset to show his eagerness, his curiosity to learn. He wanted to be able to recite the topic in one go and without any mistake and please his teacher. He wanted to make his teacher happy. His desperation is reflected in his willingness to give away all that he had in return for reciting the lesson well. As Franz did not know the lesson, he got confused and stood quietly. His heart was beating fast as he was ashamed of himself and did not have the courage to face his teacher. Mr. Hamel said to Franz that he would not scold him as now he had realized his mistake. Every day Franz told himself that he would study the next day, and now the opportunity to study had ended and he knew nothing till now. Mr. Hamel says that all the people of Alsace were to be blamed, as no one was serious towards learning. He tells the class that the enemies, that means the Prussians, would laugh at them and say that they only show to be Frenchmen as they can neither speak nor write their own language. He says that Franz should not feel guilty as everyone is at fault today. Mr. Hamel says that Franz's parents were not interested in getting him educated. They wanted him to work at a farm or a mill and earn some extra money. He says that as a teacher, he was also not interested in teaching them. He would send them to his home to water the plants. Sometimes he would declare a holiday and go for fishing. Mr. Hamel praises their mother tongue, French language, as being the most beautiful, clearest and most logical language in the world. He tells the class to guard their language as it is the only way to free oneself from the prison of slavery. If a person knows his mother tongue well, no one can enslave him. Knowing the mother tongue well as a language is a tool to fight domination. The teacher took a lesson in grammar. That day Franz was surprised that he understood the lesson with ease. He felt that he had been attentive and that Hamel also explained the lesson with a lot of patience. Franz felt that the teacher wanted to give them all the knowledge he had before leaving that school. After grammar, they had a lesson in writing. Mr. Hamel gave the class new notebooks with Franz, Alsace, beautifully written on them. Franz felt that here was an air of patriotism in the class. The notebooks were like flags of France that were floating all around. The entire class was busy writing, and the only sound that could be heard was that of the pen writing on the paper. Once, some insects flew into the class, but no one panicked as everyone was busy writing. The writer considers the pigeons sitting on the roof of the class to be students as well, and says that even the pigeons were busy scratching the roof with their claws, and it seemed that they were also busy writing the tasks of French language. The coo sound of the pigeons could be heard in the class, and Franz wondered that would the Prussians force the pigeons also to change their language and coo or sing in German. The writer wants to say that language comes naturally to a being and it cannot be forced upon anyone, be it the pigeons or the French men. In between writing, Franz looked at Mr. Hamel, who sat still and stared at the different things in the classroom in succession as if he wanted to memorize the appearance of everything before leaving. Mr. Hamel had been teaching for the last 40 years. The only changes were that the desks in the classroom had worn out due to extra use over the years. The walnut trees in the garden outside had grown taller, and the hop vine on the outer wall of the school building had climbed up to the roof. Only these were the changes. Franz feels that the teacher must be heartbroken to be sent away from a school where he had spent 40 years of his life. The noises of his sister packing and moving their luggage could be heard from the room upstairs as they had to leave the next day. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their own lessons. Well, in different sing-songs. Ba, be, bi, bo, bo, etc. Hauser had put on his spectacles and, holding the primer in both his hands, recited the letters with the class. He was crying. His voice trembled as he spoke. Franz had mixed feelings. He found it funny to see how an old man like Hauser was crying and trembling. And on the other hand, he also felt emotional. Just then the clock at the church struck 12 and the prayer song began. At the same moment, the sound of the trumpets played by the Prussian soldiers who were returning from the drill was heard. Mr. Hamel's face became dull and colorless as the time had come for the class to get over. He stood straight and motionless, and Franz says that he had never appeared to be so tall. Mr. Hamel began to speak but could not continue as he was overpowered by his emotions. He took a piece of chalk and wrote the words, Vive la France. The meaning of this term is, Long live France, on the blackboard as large as he could. Then he stopped writing, bent towards the wall, and without speaking anything signaled the class to leave as the class was over.